And now let me introduce Mike Price, who will review the items that we want to include in our agreement. And please note these items are in no particular order at all.
Hopefully they're in some order.
Well, they're in the order that we have on the list.
You're going to change it?
No,
Good.
They're not in order of priority. How's that?
Good evening. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I got involved in this 4 years ago as the area superintendent. And had I known that it would have been so difficult to fill that position, I probably wouldn't have gone. But I do want to introduce somebody who's here tonight, Julie Martell. Dr. Julie Martell is the interim area superintendent of this area. She is and will be an integral portion of this if the board doesn't name a successor, a permanent person. And even if they do, it's going to be difficult to bring that person up to speed by the time we have to present something to the board. So Julie and I would probably be involved in getting this to the board and getting it beyond. So as we're looking at that. One of the things that drew me back, I got this email that said, Mike, would you help? That's the short version. And one of the things that drew me back is I believe in community schools and cluster schools. I live in Mira Mesa, and Mira Mesa High School has one of the agreements now with the board that says we can do things kind of our way. It doesn't go quite as far as all the cluster schools yet, but they will be working on it. It's similar for high school. La Jolla High School has been working under a autonomy agreement for many, many years. And we're trying to take a look and say, okay, what could that do for the cluster itself and move it around? I believe in that. And the board has approved 2 documents and is working under 2 things. And if you get onto their website and take a look for a document that's called Vision 2020, we're taking a look at what schools should be like in the year 2020 in San Diego Unified School District. And the kinds of things that you'll see tonight that you've seen already are in that document. The other thing that they've all come on record about and being in favor of is community-based schooling. Each single member of the board, and I've yet to meet one of them, the 4 of the 5 people that I do know, have all told me individually that they are for community-based schools. And so as La Jolla takes a look at putting all their schools together under one agreement, really they now have the idea that says they should be able to go to the board member and say, hey, we're ready to do this, here's the agreement, here's what we want to do, will you tell us yes? And they should be able to say yes and be able to look that thing through. So let me go through some of the questions. So the first one involves professional development. This, you can read on the screen, we just support the individual school's ability to determine professional development, content, meeting days, and times. Schools right now have a great deal of latitude. They have an ability to be able to put together professional development, education, training for their school sites, select that. It's not always been that way, and it may not be that way in the future. But there's a lot of power in K-12 educators getting together and saying, we'd like this to happen for every single student in our cluster, K-12. And this is what we want to have happen. And we want to be on the same page teaching, we want to be on the same page content, we want to have the right themes and threads all the way through this idea. And we want to be able to put it into a document that says the community and community schools, through the SSCs, through the leadership teams, through the teachers, the principals working together, can put that together. That's why the first question's out there. In other words, it's a very key piece to a professional organization to be able to determine what kind of development you're going to do for yourselves and how it's going to result in a classroom presentation for your students. I'm going to stop after each one and see if there are any questions. All right? And I'm keeping an eye on the time so we can get out of here on time. Yes, sir.
So who determines that now?
Right now, as we sit here, it's principals and teachers together, for the most part. Okay?
So that's the way it's done today?
Then the district has some of the things going through it. Okay? In past superintendencies, it has been prescribed day by day, week by week, minute by minute, month by month, all the way through saying you're going to do this. And it doesn't make a difference whether your students are at the 5 schools that are in the La Jolla cluster or the 14 that are in the Morse cluster. Regardless of need, regardless of ability, regardless of where the students are and what they're trying to do, what the community would like to have happen with their kids, it's going to be that one-size-fits-all type of thing, and that's what we want to try to prevent from ever going back to.
I'm just saying there's some value, it might be some value in the question rather than the district. Just so we, because the people do this, the district.
When this comes on, we actually have a whole essay that will fill about 2 paragraphs of each question that says how it works now and how we would like it to work.
Yeah, we did some. You're saying
In
that.
terms of designing the questionnaire to the same structure, so people that don't read the essays,
Will it change the question on with the question? But we did that the first survey and we learned too many words.
So we try to keep it.
Sure you do.
This is going to be survey number 11.
Survey 6. Okay, position allocations. This is one which is support the governance team in conjunction with the school site council, school sites to determine position allocations from discretionary funds in accordance with collective bargaining agreements. This doesn't mean the main teachers for classrooms. Right? Every school has a pool of discretionary dollars that come to them in some form or another. Right? It's been large at times, it's been very small at times. But at times, the district office, that nameless, faceless entity which I was part of, okay, says, you're going to get these discretionary dollars, but you have to buy this person or this type of person. The greatest example at the high school level, when I was principal of the high school, was we received Title I funds, which came for, based on the free and reduced lunch count. But I had $300,000 of money to come to the school, but I had spent $100,000 on a graduation coach that helps students graduate from high school. Now, my graduation rate was 99.995%. But I had to buy that position when I could have turned it into an additional counselor or something else. And this is what we're trying to get for the cluster that says, when the discretionary funds, not those allocations that come for your classroom teachers, classroom, those kinds of people, that we will be able to use them for what the school deems necessary to be able to meet the needs of the students in the schools. Now, a graduation coach may have been fine for another high school that had problems with the graduation rate. For mine, at that point in time, I didn't need it. And it was one of those things that was put upon me that said, I really didn't like, I did it because I was principal, I wanted to keep my job. So, questions on position allocations. Those are just discretionary dollars. Yes, ma'am?
You mentioned that Illinois High School is autonomous already, so can the principal there already make these types of decisions?
In some instances, yes. Okay. A little bit of that has been eroded over time, and when this agreement goes in, La Jolla High School will come underneath it. So we're trying to strengthen it. We did revise it, or did pass a revised version of La Jolla's that strengthened some pieces of it that had been written many, many years ago during Ellen Gerson's superintendency, and now it's a little bit broader and helps the school a little better, helps the principal a little better, at least in my understanding. Yes, ma'am?
So the pool of discretionary funds changes from year to year, and you don't really know what it's going to be.
That's true.
So you can hire someone and then they may be gone if you don't have the discretionary funds.
There is that possibility.
Right.
Right. In fact, in the last couple of years, not this year, I don't believe, but previous years, the schools got their allocation and they got this pool of what we call X dollars. And they could spend those X dollars on just about anything, but the X dollars came through and we cut them 15, 20%, same thing. So it's a possibility that, yes, you can hire somebody and next year that person could be gone. Yes?
That would also fall under clerical. I know there's different levels of staffing, and you can have whoever you want.
We're going to get to clerical in a couple minutes. Okay, so hang on to that question, because that one's a little bit different from some things that... Additional clerical, yes.
It would fall under additional.
Additional clerical,
You
yes.
get whatever level you wanted.
Additional. Okay, filling vacancies. When filling certificate of vacancies, would you support the school site interviewing all qualified applicants in accordance with the waiver process outlined in the SBA bargain agreement? The way the situation works now by contract is that, for example, Donna's got an elementary school position available at Hoyle Elementary School. She posts that position for whatever grade level, whatever needs to be done. That goes into the district. District teachers from all over the district can put in what we call a bid on it. They bid on that position. The central office human resources department goes through the names of all those people and says, are you qualified? And what means their idea of qualification, their standard is that they have correct credential, okay, and they've taught, within the last 5 years, they've taught in that position. That's all that they do for the idea of qualification. Then they take 5 names off of the list, the most 5 senior teachers that have bid on a position, and send them to the school. And usually, there may or may not be a match. Okay? And usually it's a fight for a principal to be able to say, this person or this group of people really doesn't fit this school. They don't share the same teaching philosophy, they don't share any number of different kinds of things, which doesn't necessarily make them a bad teacher, doesn't make them a good fit for that particular school site. What we'd like to do is have the ability to be able to say, everybody that bids on the job, we'd like to see the entire pool of applicants. Okay? And we'll take on the screening, we'll take on the interviewing, we'll talk to everybody. Everybody that's on that list gets a shot at coming down and talking to the principals and the hiring people who are doing that. And so currently, there are a group of schools in the district now that have that ability. Okay? Anybody that has an API 1, 2, or 3, and any magnet school. So there is precedent for it in the school district. So the thing would be to get the waiver to do it. There are schools in the district that have this ability now, okay? API, their API scores are in the first, second, and third percentile, right? And if they are a magnet school, they get the entire list of everybody that's there. We'd like to spread that out and say, we'd like to see everybody on the list, find those matches. That's it. Questions?
That only includes people already in the system.
That includes people in the system first.
Okay. So you have to be hired into the school district.
There are certain circumstances for certain positions where you can go outside if you've exhausted the pool that's inside. Usually they're highly specialized and they're usually at secondary level. Math, science, or language. Okay. Yeah, Latin's a good one for the cluster here. I had to go outside and find a French teacher because there were no French teachers that met the match that I needed for University City High School when I was principal. So it does happen, but it's very rare. If you're looking for that's not right. If you're looking for a 7th grade English teacher, okay, you are more likely to find a person within the system itself that will match those qualifications that you want. Okay? If you're looking for a person that's going to teach Latin and French, or Latin and Greek, more than likely in Santa Unified, you're not going to find many of them. Okay? You'd have to steal the guys from Big Ships. And he won't leave, I know that. Okay? Any other
So
questions?
right now, it's like a lottery. If you're a teacher applying for a job, 50 people could apply for a job here,
Right.
and 45 of them, their resume is not even going to get to the principal.
That's correct.
It's not a lottery, it's seniority.
It's seniority.
So
Oh.
teachers been in the district the longest and
Longest.
higher
It's
up.
by seniority at that point in time.
So you won't see,
So you don't see any of the young, bright-eyed vision
Not that,
Or some.
not that
Not all
teachers
of
that have been here around for
Right.
No.
great
Well, and
teachers
a,
too.
again,
Yeah.
a seniority teacher
Yeah.
entered the pool. You might have a pool of all less experienced. And
You
it's
may-
just whoever's going
you
to
may have.
apply.
Well, you might have all middle school, high school teachers that happen to have elementary school credentials
Or you
that
may-
haven't been in elementary school for years.
You may want a kindergarten teacher, and many of the people who apply because they want to come to this school have been teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and it's just, you've just been teaching a different animal, and
Right.
so it could not
So
necessarily.
this is huge.
This is huge.
And this, is this part of what you need the teachers, do you need a
This
waiver
would be a
for?
waiver from the Teachers Association, yes.
When are you gonna teach it?
Yes, sir.
Well, is CEA, are you willing to turn off this waiver, or is it going to be a fight?
They are willing to work with us on this waiver, yes. That's when we had the cluster-wide meeting.
Well, I'll just say that Rob and I have spent a lot of time meeting with Jonathan Mello, who is the area representative, sort of one of the right-hand people to Bill Freeman, who is the president of the union. And Bill Freeman came out and met, both of them have been out and met with us. And then all of us on the cluster agreement board have met with Jonathan. And the first time that Rob and I met with Bill Freeman and with Jonathan Mello, they said, almost the first thing they said to us was, this developing community school reform is their top priority. So they're really 100% behind this. They see this as a way of teachers being more empowered to bring decision-making more in the classroom where it belongs and out of the hands of, the powers that be up here. So actually, Jonathan is the one who's been helping us understand the waiver process and how to apply for the waivers. Is it a slam dunk? Not necessarily, but he thinks it's worth going for. There are a lot of factors that are coming into play right now to make this whole process really ripe for the picking. Everybody is behind it. There's momentum in the community with teachers. The union is behind it, which then, of course, brings even more teachers in because, no teachers want to do anything that's going to weaken their contract. And so that's one of the fine line that we've been walking over this period of time, is trying to craft something that doesn't compromise the safety and security of teachers, especially teachers that do have seniority and teachers that have worked hard and long and well in the district. But also making sure that we are, bringing some decision-making down to the community level where we can meet the needs of the kids that we see every day instead of this, San Diego City Schools. It's very difficult, even with the best intentions, to make decisions that meet everyone's needs.
Thank you.
I just kind of piggyback on that. I'm from Bird Rock, and this was probably one of the questions that a lot of teachers had the most. Well, there were questions. There was, lots of different feelings. And as Julie said, people don't want people want their jobs. They don't want that weakened. There was something that was one question that was taken out. I think this kind of broadens things, but once you mull this over in your minds, you might talk to different teachers that But I mean, I think we are real close to coming to an agreement. Different people will have different feelings, but we have to have the teacher buy-in, and we need the parent support, but we need the teacher buy-in as well.
And I'll just add 2 more points. One of the other things that Jonathan and Bill Freeman said is that it's critically important to them that there's community support, as with the district. And so I don't want to say it's incredibly rare, but it's somewhat rare for the district and the union to be talking the same language at the same time. And about this, about community schools reform, they are talking, out of the right side of their mouths, both of them. But what they're both saying is they need to see huge community support. So when Fran says, please take the survey, please show your support, please spread the word, we can do all we want as teachers and this small pod of people that are involved, in the cluster and meeting every month and having these incredibly informative meetings and making good decisions and bringing in speakers. But if the community doesn't show support, the big push we're trying to get through this agreement won't go through. And then the second thing I want to say is that these waivers, if authorized by SDA, are only for 1 year, and we have to reapply for them each year. So if indeed SDA does see that it is causing some, negative effect to the security of good,
Or if we saw,
or if we saw and didn't want to reapply, right, either way. But it is a 1-year process and you reapply.
I just want to say one thing so the parents do know that all of these suggestions, including this one, they came from the teachers. Please don't think that this is the parents trying to push the parent ideas on teachers. It was the teachers that submitted it, and it's been the teachers that have voted on it. So this is not something that, we're trying to, pull a fast one or anything like that. We are supporting our educators because this is what they want. I mean, they want to be able to hire the people that they're going to be working with.
The original survey that I saw 3 years ago was exactly that. It's been that long.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If this is implemented, if the whole process is implemented, what is the security for it not being changed back? 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, because SDA, EA, bargaining agreement fails? Is there a performance-based mechanism in this cluster that says, hey, if we're performing at this level way above the normal standards, this cannot go back, type of thing? Or is this a permanently affixed type of thing that happens once this is all passed?
A couple of answers to that question. Okay, number one, performance metrics are not part of this right now. There are some things, for example, La Jolla High School's agreement was contingent on the fact that they stayed at an 800 API or above. The board will more than likely want something like that, and I haven't read Mira Mesa's agreement to find out what they did. But there's going to be accountability. There will be accountability measures in the final agreement. What we're trying to do now is get the framework and then start writing it. On school board issues, you have to understand the nature of school boards, which most of us do. They can do whatever they want to do. All it takes is 3 votes. except for selling property and getting rid of capital raising, it takes 4. And there's one that takes 5, I think, which one it is. So it's entirely possible that even though this board and the previous boards have gone through the idea of saying we support community-based schools and we support Vision 2020, which we crafted and did when I was working, that a board, say 4 or 5 years down the line, that has completely different membership than this board now, could come in and say, we don't like any of this and we're going a different direction. That's their prerogative. And they're held accountable by the voters in the city of San Diego or in the school district's boundaries. And so that's where the accountability comes from board. It comes in the idea of the voters saying, yes, we believe you're doing a good job, or no, we don't believe you're going in the right direction or not doing a good job. So to answer your question, yes, it's possible. Is it likely? Probably not, but it's possible.
I think
Look at La Jolla High, it's
question
been over 10 years.
Yes.
But there is no way to make it a permanent thing. If we meet these accountability measures, it will be permanent. They can't do that.
They can't.
But I think as a cluster, we believe accountability is very important, and so we will implement accountability into this process. I think one of the weaknesses of the autonomy agreement at the high school was that the accountability measures weren't strong enough or strict enough. And it's been now re-looked at, and they have reworked it to build in stronger accountability. So just drafting off of that experience, we realized that, that we need to integrate accountability into what we're doing if this is going to really take off. And continue through the board and through the community for that matter.
And there really isn't an organization that takes pride in itself that doesn't want to be held accountable for doing what it says it's going to do. And I've worked long enough with this group of people that says this is what we want to do. With the teachers here, I've been in a lot of their classrooms. I haven't been there for a couple of years, but there's a lot of the classrooms I was here. And there are lots of good things going on here for kids. And so they want to be held. In fact, they didn't mind, for the most part, the area superintendent walking through the classroom and seeing what they were doing because they were proud to show it off. And so saying this is how you're going to provide service to students. It doesn't make any difference whether you have one hard of hearing student, 20 hard of hearing students, one hard of hearing student at Bird Rock, one at Torrey Pines, and one in La Jolla. They each get that whole thing. What we want to do is have the flexibility instead of having the things dictated by the special education office downtown saying, Donna and Sally and Jim are going to do it this way. Maybe they've got a better way of doing it by pooling their resources and saying, how can we work to get better services for these kids? Either teacher more effectiveness, different kind of modeling, whatever needs to happen, have the flexibility to be able to do it. Because right now there is none. Unless that's changed. Okay. I didn't think it had, but right now there's none. And the same thing for classroom teachers. Classroom teachers know the kids best, aside from parents. And when they say, I can't reach this student, can I reach across to a colleague over here? They really don't have that ability to be able to do that at this point, especially if they're trying to meet a special needs student's needs. So what we want is the flexibility to be able to take that and say, can we develop some? There may be certain cases that we can't. Okay? But the district, I'll tell you right now, the district itself does. Okay? The blind program, students that can't see, or are partially blind, was all clustered in the Madison cluster, some in Claremont. But they cluster the people together. They have different service models. So what we want is what the district is doing for the cluster, in essence.
So from the end of what you just said, are you talking about having kids be in a different school? So for instance, if you've got Torrey Pines, if there, I don't know, let's say we've got a kid that's hearing impaired at Torrey Pines, a kid that's hearing impaired at La Jolla, and 2 kids that are hearing impaired at Bird Rock, right? So would we cluster them all at Bird Rock because there's one teacher at Bird Rock that has ASL, or
That might be a solution. It would be up to the teachers, the IEP team, and the parents to be able to decide how we're going to service the students that are here.
and if a parent of a child doesn't want their child to move that school?
Then they talk with them.
And it might even be shared.
Right.
Yeah.
Sharing teachers.
So teachers go from one site to the other, kind of,
Right.
which is one.
Or even possibly having the same teachers in the cluster. that if we don't have, for example, if we have services we have to provide for certain handicapping conditions, we can use that term. And oftentimes, schedules are made out at the convenience of downtown because I've got a hole here and a hole here and a hole here. So I'll put this person A here, person B here, and person C here, not realizing that realistically the schools in this particular cluster are all about 10 minutes from each other, much closer between Bird Rock and, but you can get there, because I used to do it.
So,
And one person could do that, but the people downtown don't know that, but we do.
okay, so like you share your speech first.
Yeah, you should speak.
Options.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
option
it's
is
an option, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, because there are no options, there are no options to it now.
Right, right.
You
We
get,
just get dictated
Yeah.
the resources we have and how we're doing it.
okay, assessments. Would you support the individual school's ability to decide which district or non-district assessments to administer and develop a timeline that would be followed to monitor student achievement? For example, sites may discontinue use of district-created assessments, schools will continue to administer state, and we cannot go away from the STAR system. All right, from what the state testing system is going to look like, we don't know what it's going to look like in the future with the new standards that are being rolled out. By the way, if you haven't gone and taken a look at the new state standards, the Common Core curriculum and kinds of things, stay on top of that. Okay, there is a huge shift coming. Okay, in schools and school districts in California. Okay, and in assessment. In terms of what students are going to be asked to do and how to perform it, and take a look. It's going to look very different than it looks now. What this is basically written to, and I'm going to speak at a secondary level, although there are other things at elementary for sure, but there are benchmark exams that the district has decided they're going to do, specifically in mathematics and common core subjects. Sometimes they fit up with the pacing that a school is on, sometimes they don't. Sometimes in schools, the students are way out here because they've been accelerated in their learning, and they're giving a benchmark that is months behind them, or weeks behind them, or worse. And so, but that's that lockstep type of thing that says every student, every place has to do that same thing every way. And this is what we're trying to get away from. The idea that says, yes, teachers and students parents want to know how kids are doing, right? But let's develop our own. Let's have some kind of assessment system on a school site that's reasonable, that's facilitates, that gives information to parents and teachers that we can use right then, rather than having to wait and turn it around and 3 months later get it back. That's one of the things that was one of my major problems with the STAR system, is that it does nothing for us to be able to help improve instruction during the school year is given in. It's what we didn't get right, rather than how can we help the student improve. Yes, ma'am.
Does the district use the benchmarks to evaluate?
Do you evaluate teachers?
Mm-hmm.
No.
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 Does the principal use?
I don't think so, no. Not in a formal way, no.
Okay.
No, not at all. For a couple of things. Number one, they haven't been validated through a system that would allow
I
them
think
to do
it's
it.
ridiculous, but my feeling is that some teachers,
I don't know of any principals in this cluster, and they haven't changed since I left, that were using either state standards tests, benchmark assessments, district assessments, or anything else in teachers' evaluations. Okay, as saying, if you don't get this student from here to here, you're getting a poor evaluation. I don't know of any of that going on. Okay, I didn't at the time. I don't think it's going on now.
And I just wanted to add also, not just the when, but the frequency. Teachers are losing, especially in math and in English where the benchmarks are, they're losing so much instructional time because they're spending time prepping for the benchmark, they're spending time taking the benchmark, and they're giving 6-8 benchmarks a year, you're a math teacher, I'm a science teacher, I don't give the benchmarks, but I hear in my grade level meetings, teachers continuously complaining about how often they have to give benchmarks and losing so many, is it 9? Yeah. Just the frequency, not just the timing, and it may be ahead of what the benchmark is against the test, and the kids have forgotten half of it, so it's not a realistic measure. Plus, it's supposed to be what we call formative assessment, which, like Mike is saying, it's supposed to inform us as to what maybe we need to reteach or go back and do. Well, if you're giving it in this lockstep manner, you're not going to go back to a month before. You're not going to, at that point, it's almost impossible to look back. So we need more control about the timing, but also the quantity of the benchmarks.
This is one thing that we know that Mira Mesa High School put in their new agreement, and I've checked with them several times, and so far the principal has told me that's one of the things that the teachers are very excited about. They've created in their own departments their own assessments, and they use them as needed, and they just feel so much more control over knowing what the students are, how it's going, instead of having so many so frequently and often not the right kind. So that's one thing we've learned is positive for them.
Use some of the district assessments, if that's met. So it's not throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater, but it's choosing the ones that are most. We have
Options.
Lisa mentioned Mira Mesa High School. If you get a chance, go and take a look at the last 3 or 4 years of STAR testing results for Mira Mesa High School and see what autonomy has been able to do for that single high school. Because the teachers have been working at it, and they are now near the top. If you're taking a look at just that one number, that API score, they are very, very near the top of the school. I'm not going there, okay? I just want to let you know, saying there are some benefits. One last question, we're going to move on, because I want to try to get you out of here by 8. Yes.
Okay, just a question. So this is an example of a question that would be on the survey?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, what if, say, I'm taking a survey and I don't know very much about the district data assessments? How would I find out? How do I make an educated decision?
So on each question like this, underneath it is going to be explanation paragraphs of what that means, how it works now, and how we would like it to work. So if you already know, then you don't have to read the stuff underneath that question. If you don't know, then go ahead and read below the question. Each question will have its own page.
Okay, I think that's going to be important.
Yes.
And if you know a teacher that you're close to, talk to your teacher. Because the teachers have created this. Every word has been, created by our teachers. And so grab the teachers that you're closest to and say,
I think those of us who are in this room know that many of our younger group are going to get into this under violation of friendship and other things. Is it designed so that if you answer yes to everything, it goes? So that you can do a little preliminary email because you're doing the thinking for the people who aren't here tonight, and you say, FYI, vote yes on everything, or we're not friends anymore, bye, whatever it is. I'm making a joke, but so it's like vote yes on everything. Yes is the right answer. I mean, my husband, he's always like, if it's a proposition you're not sure, vote no.
so in this case,
So in this case, if you're not sure, vote yes.
Here's my segue to my closing right now. Okay, under scope and sequence, would you support individual schools' ability to determine courses of study, scope and sequence, curriculum, instructional strategies, text selection, program materials guided by the state standards? This is almost verbatim right out of the way agreement. Okay?
It's verbatim.
We modified a couple of words in there, but realistically what it does is gives the teachers in the school site power over how, what, when, and how deep they want to teach something, and what they want to put in their course of study. The example I gave at the cluster meeting was one of the reasons that there is a Latin class at both the junior school here, the middle school, and the high school. Number one, parents would like to have it. Number two, you're in competition, okay, with a middle school and a high school program here in the village. And some parents make a decision based on where they want to go. Okay, if they have a choice, they will make it on that. The district curriculum allows for that, but you won't see it across the board. It's unique to this area. And you want to be able to have that uniqueness stay. Did they just say that? The unique ability to be able to do that, stay. Okay? And so that's what this is all about. It's the power, it's one of the things that teachers really need to have, to be able to have control, and the principals have the control of the curriculum and content guided by state standards. Yes?
I have a question. The way that all of the questions are phrased really gets to the individual schools and the school sites and those teachers and that principal. What about the cluster agreement creates, particularly among the elementary schools, some cohesion in scope and sequence so that all the kids are arriving at Muirlands?
That will come in the language that comes later. This is just the idea that says, will you take these ideas and will these will become a framework and hang everything underneath it, and we'll take it and modify it for a cluster base rather than an individual school.
And just cluster history in general, like, that's one of the reasons we formed as a cluster. We started, there was a big luncheon in Elmwood Elementary, all the elementary school teachers together, kind of by grade, they started collaborating, which was
I remember having read some of that, but
Yeah.
it's like, if you're somebody who just sees this survey, it might strike them as like, this is really about each individual school site within the cluster. Where's the cluster? So it's just a comment.
And if I could just jump in on that, sort of to piggyback on Fran's introduction, that was my main reason for getting involved, is that I think it's crazy that we are not talking more vertically through grade levels, horizontally, and that was my initial reason for getting involved, is to make that happen. We meet as a cluster board that is representative of teachers, parents, administrators, basically every month. And these meetings they're good. You know how meetings normally aren't that good. These meetings are good because there's a lot of meaningful talk that goes on throughout the grade levels, across curriculum, and throughout the schools. So the agreement is empowering us in the classroom, but the cluster, we're still a board, we're still an organization, we're still going to be working on making the cluster more comprehensive. That's the job of the board. This is just a vehicle for the classroom.
I'll get your questions, comment that of the 3 school areas that I supervised when I was area superintendent, the Kearney schools, University City schools, and those in La Jolla, those were the 3 meetings that I never wanted to go into for the cluster meetings. The Hoyas was already in operation. I built the seats when I was a principal there, and then when I was area superintendent, I had built Kearney's. But I never had a problem going to those meetings. And you should have seen my calendar. Okay, this meeting downtown, this meeting downtown, this meeting downtown, whatever. Okay, all of the things. But I never had that because they were always working for the betterment of the kids in the schools. And it was teachers, parents, and principals on those cluster committees all working together. Yes.
So it's really exciting to see the creativity that I think that this will allow in the classroom, in hiring, getting rid of some of the deadening effects of all the assessment and the message that I think that goes to the kids and these things. So I just feel like I'm going to leave with the question of what could I do to get this, get it moving. And it sounds like the first thing is broadcast, like, hey guys, so I was here, so don't believe it. So am I walking away with the right idea?
That's the right message.
We still have more.
You got an email list, right?
It's what, yeah.
You got an email list. Okay, let me continue on because I want to try to honor your time. And before the story comes in, supposedly in Washington, so we'll see. This is where the classified staff question comes in. Given that assignment of classified staff must be in accordance with CSEA, OTBS, Office of Technical Business Support is what OTBS means. Contracts and subject to an evaluation process, we just support school sites to allow classified staff to remain in the organization during reduction in force. There are a couple of hurdles here. Number 1, reduction in force on the classified side of a school district is governed by state law and education code. That's where it's written. That's where it says if you are in a job classification and people that are least senior lose their positions, you are able to bump into those positions down regardless of evaluation, regardless of anything else, just because you happen to be in the unit and you've held that position in the past. Things that have happened in this cluster and in every cluster, okay, in the last several years, schools have lost their entire front office staffs, okay, in the reduction in force. Okay? I know because my former secretary wound up here in Chris's office, all kinds of moving around, and I keep walking into the school's office to say hi to principal's friends, and I'm finding my staff members from University City High School all over the school district. So this one will require some help from our unions. This will require some help in Sacramento, which we think we might have. But the idea that says, when this is all happening, should the cluster be able to maintain its classified staff? When you take a look at it, they're the faces of the schools. Okay, who do you see when you first walk in the office? More than likely, you're not going to see the principal, the VP. You may see a teacher friend, but who are you going to see? You're going to see a secretary or a clerk, the nurse, not the nurse, the nurse's assistant, or another classified person. A gentleman that will see you're trying to help fix our PA system. Custodial, same thing. So as you're planning those kinds of things around, this is what we'd like to be able to do here, to be able to work on this thing, realizing this is probably the hardest piece of the entire piece because it has to go to a state level. So, start and end times and calendar. This one might be just as hard. Sitting on the calendar committee as I did for 4 years, I might thought I was insane. I think I agree with her. Would you support our cluster having control over daily start and end times and or school calendar? Okay, a couple of different things here. School calendar is constrained somewhat by state law, but the board sets the school calendar. The district is currently, from what I understand, if my sources are right, trying to move everybody to a common calendar, trying to get off the year-round versus traditional schedule. We're trying to move everybody to a traditional type of schedule. Okay? Once they do that, because there's about a $16 million cost to that, then they can set calendar any place they want to, and schools can participate in doing a school calendar that says, okay, maybe we'll start in August and we'll end the semester at the winter break, we'll pick up again in January, and we'll end in May. That's possible. Okay. It's hard to do right now with all kinds of things. The daily start and end times, okay, are somewhat set by our transportation grid. Okay. The hardest part of that, at least for me, number one as a parent, number two, watching parents struggle with this, is having schools in a cluster. If you have students in your family that are spaced, so you've got an elementary student, a middle school student, and a high school student, and you've got one that starts at 9, one that starts at 8:30, one that starts at 7:30, you're about ready to go crazy. So we have to have a little more coordination there. We'd like to be able to have that. For example, here, the high school and the middle school are only a couple minutes off, 10, 15 minutes off, I think, which made it real nice for me. But the elementary schools are much later. Okay? In the UC cluster, the high school starts at 7:30, the middle school starts at 9. And so that was one of their big items too, is the idea of saying, we have a little bit more control over calendars because it's crazy this close. Plus the fact that we were talking before about getting teachers together and going K-12 and taking a look at this. You've got all these different start and ending times that are way all over the board, you'll never get teachers together because they start and end all at different times.
And I was just going to throw in there too with this.
The last 2 years, I've been on the East Coast during the opening of school. Okay, don't call me, I won't be there, in a way. But when we were traveling around, all of those school districts, very rarely do the school districts now start Labor Day. Some still do. My home state of Michigan starts Labor Day, but most of them have been in school for 3 weeks already. So they are 3 weeks ahead of our students at the high school, middle school, and elementary school students when they're hitting assessment types of pieces all the way down the board. And so when we run up against the idea in high school, particularly about AP testing, that always goes the first 2 weeks of May, period, that they're 3 weeks ahead of our kids.
Why did that stop? As someone who didn't grow up here, I don't understand why did you need to shift it back to August?
They started going back to August, partially for that reason, but partially they wanted their semesters to end at the winter break. Okay? And they wanted their semester to end in May when the colleges were getting out. So they were trying to keep their sync. And not all the school districts do it, but a majority of them do. And they start all over the place. Some of them start as early as the second week of August. Sweetwater Union School District runs a year-round school situation. They start in July for all their schools, and they run it that way. Okay. Repairs. The district office cannot fulfill a work order request within 48 business hours. You can support the option of having your school site contract with the district approved vendor to make the repairs and be reimbursed for the costs.
Yes.
Okay? Okay? Any questions? Okay, now, there are a couple of caveats on this, and we talked it through at the cluster meeting. Number one, if we can negotiate with the school district, obviously we're going to have to use our maintenance people are union employees, okay? They're tradesmen, they're proud of the work they do, there's just too much of it for them to do for the number of people there are. That's the bottom line. And realistic, people downtown, we're honest with you, and most of them will be, they'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you right now. There just aren't enough people to get the amount of work done. We've got 205 school sites and work sites in the school district. Okay? Spread out over 200 square miles. There's just not enough people to do it. And when you have, well, at one time there were only 2 gentlemen left in the school district that could replace glass windows. And so they're trying to keep up with all that. So, and so as you're looking at that, this is the kind of thing that says, for instance, and I'll give you the horror story that happened in area my, there was the heat did not come on in the media center. The media center in an elementary school was where all the tutoring was going on, where all the volunteers and where all what we call push-in teachers were working. It went off in November. It was still not on by the end of January because the district folks could not get to it, be able to do it. And yet when you walked in there, you needed a parka. It's not a good learning environment, it's not a good teaching environment, it's not a good environment for kids. And obviously it should have had a higher priority, but there were other things that apparently that were worse on there, and they couldn't get to getting it repaired. But if you go onto a union shop that said, okay, it's a hasty, I don't know, something that's on this list, district approves it, here's a contractor, we can call it, get it done, give me the bill, get it paid. It's one thing we get our schools taken care of, so it's one of the things we do. Purchasing, would you support your site having the option to purchase supplies, including technology, directly from vendors? One of the reasons that we don't necessarily always get the best cost on supplies is sometimes we are 120 days out on paying our bills. Okay, any of you own small businesses? What happens if you don't pay your vendors, or if your vendors don't pay you, or your customers don't pay you? You know, 120 days, you're gone. Right? Unfortunately, we do it routinely. And the amount of paperwork, I worked in the financial office upstairs for 3 years. The amount of stuff that goes through the school district is amazing, but school sites have the capability to be able to do it. And we would also get better prices at times on certain items. Local control over funds, would you support your site to have control over restricted and unrestricted funds? A little bit of explanation. There are 2 large buckets of money that come to schools. There are a lot of little things that come to school. I think the city unified there are about 2,000 funding streams. But there are 2 buckets. One's called unrestricted, and you'll often hear referred to as green dollars. You can buy anything you want to with these dollars in the unrestricted bucket. In other words, if I give John $100 in unrestricted dollars, he can go buy anything he wants to. Computers, teachers, counselors, you name it, chairs, he can go buy anything he wants to. In the unrestricted bucket are all those things that come with restricted bucket, all those things that come with strings. For example, special education funds, okay? Title I funds, okay, which are distributed to schools based on, you know, you don't have that here, okay, yet. We're probably not going to get it either, okay? But other things that come that way. Some of those, okay, have some flexibility to them, but the district has locked them in on the restricted side. Okay? The state's working very hard to get them unrestricted, but what happens at the state level if they do that is they block them all into a single block grant, and then they reduce the amount of funding and then ship you a block grant and say, here, spend it any way you want to. What we'd like to have here is just the flexibility for the school sites to be able to have control over their restricted and not be told how and what they have to spend them at once they have the funds. In other words, obviously, you've got to buy your teachers. You have to buy certain things that are going on. But all your discretionary money that comes in should be at the discretion of the school site. Not being told this. Priority attendance. Would you support the right to get priority attendance for pupils whose parent or legal guardian is assigned to a cluster school as his or her primary place of employment? In other words, if you've got a teacher, okay, that's coming to your school sites, for example, if I were going to go teach at the middle level of high school and teach math there, and I had a student that was an elementary school student, I would have the ability to be able to put them at Quail Elementary, okay, or their middle school, and that's what we're asking for our teachers. Right now, there's kind of a gentleman's agreement under the table, okay, but it's getting harder and harder and harder because of the school options office to be able to do it. It's a common courtesy and a lot of business practices to be able to do it. We'd like to have that for our teachers and our staffs here to be able to do it. Because sometimes, and I'll tell you this, and La Jolla is one of those areas that's difficult to get into. Okay? And sometimes, if parents have to worry about where our kid's going to be, or am I going to get out of here in time, or whatever else is going to go on, they may pass up an opportunity to come teach at our schools, okay, when they really be a fantastic fit, because we can't meet the needs of their families, because we can't put their kids in school here where they can pick them up on the way home and take them home. Or bring them in the morning.
Stay as late.
Or not stay.
After school.
Yeah. So there are all kinds of advantages to be able to do that. So, it's secret. When I was principal, I didn't turn a single teacher down that says I want to bring my kids to the schools and do it. And most of the time, the central office didn't find out about it. When they did, they just said, I'm sorry, I won't do it again that way. And I found a different way of doing it. It's one of those things. So. What I can say is, one of the things, as I told you before when we started, I think this is a concept that is about its time. I grew up in a I spent my elementary and some of my junior high years in a very small suburb of Detroit. There was a single high school, single middle school, and a couple of elementary schools. Very much like La Jolla. And we had our own school board, local autonomy, and it worked really well together. And that district they built one more high school, they built a couple more elementary schools, they had one more junior high, and that's where it is today. And that's as big as it got. San Diego started that way too. It was a single high school, single elementary school, a single middle school, and now look what we've got. Okay? We can't possibly meet the needs of the students that are attending different schools, different things, by doing one size fits all. And that's what a community school agreement takes a look at. So if you agree with the principals and the teachers and those that we urge you tonight, we're going to take a look at what we've got. And when the survey comes out, call, talk, email your friends. And say, take a look at this and join us. Because really what we want to do is, we don't want to secede from the school district, we don't want to bash union contracts, we don't want to do anything else. What we want to do is be able to provide the education in our community for our kids, K through 12, that we designed because we know our kids best. And we respect the board members and we respect everybody else, but realistically, we know our kids best and we want to do the best job for them. So, thank you for having me as a guest. I appreciate it.
My first question is, if one of the components, let's say the start time, or one of them fails, what happens?
What we'll do is,
We'll come to your home.
what we will do is, once we have a framework, in other words, if these things all come back and the community says, yes, we're going to go for these, we will sit down and put a framework together. Some of these things may happen immediately. Some of these things may take some time to implement over a period of time, because it's going to be a new thing for a school district. The district now has community school agreements, singular. They don't have a cluster agreement yet. We're going to be the first one. And so we're going to blaze a trail for everybody else. And so there are a lot of things that we're going to pioneer at that we don't know how long it's necessarily going to take us. The calendar and the bell times are going to take some time. Okay? Some of the other things are going to be pretty much right up there in front. We can get taken care of. And if SDA says you can have this waiver to this one section, that could go in immediately. So there's some things that will be immediate, there'll be some things that will be done, but this will be a framework that we put the language on the agreement, and you'll see the agreement before we take it to the board.
And then my second question is, we say we need community involvement. Is there a percentage of the community that needs to fill out the survey, or how?
We're going to take that up as we go along.
One of the things that they were very big about when we talked about, and when I was talking to Scott Giusti at Principal Mary Mason, one of the things was community engagement. And that's what the board came back, and they wanted community engagement. They didn't put a number on it, they didn't put a percentage on it. What they wanted was that they wanted the group of people to engage in a conversation, presentations, make sure the community was informed as to what was going on, and that they had some agreement that going forward, yes, this represents a community going forward. You're never going to get 100%. I'd like to have 100%, but if we've got a percentage of people that says, yes, if we put this survey out and we get 400 respondents, that would be a tremendous amount of community engagement for the La Jolla community to do.
Compare it to who opens the e-blasts and
Right.
that type of thing. If we get the people who are relatively engaged with schools in general, we can then prove to the board that we have community engagement.
I think, any way that I can help anyone else, I think it's going to be tough. I'm really surprised with the attendance here, and I think opening that survey is going to be a little overwhelming for people who haven't heard the background, even with it on there. So if there's any way,
We might have to do more of an outreach on a school level, do a after drop-off, go in there. I think the first week of the survey will give us a heads up. I mean, if everyone here I almost know, when you're all presidents or chairs of stuff at your school, so it's really a matter of, lots of reasons people aren't here is because they're like, tell me how it went, tell me how to vote. So if all you guys go back to the people and say,
just like when it's election time and you email your reporting people to tell you to vote for on the school board.
yeah, we are going to try and put the videotape on the website for those who don't know.
Well, and
So there's-
anything that made it to this survey, this was, we sat down and pared it down. Anything that made it to this level that we worked from had a 70% yes or maybe, for everyone to vote. And I also- From teachers, yeah. And I also wanted to piggyback on the fact, I think Mike was saying, that we really can be a national model with this program, and SDA, the union is really behind that and really wanting to see us be a model for community schools reform, as is the district. And so, this is our chance to really do something that can really impact not just our community, but be a leader. And really, I think that's going to glean a lot more support for not just what we're trying to do, but for our cluster in general. It could really turn into something really special.
One of the things the board looks at is what has been the process.
I've been taking notes.
Okay, we've been taking notes, and you saw a lot of that on the first couple of screens. So it's the idea of saying, how have we attempted to engage our community? How have we tried to talk? How have we tried to bring people in? What kinds of dialogues have we had? They're not necessarily taking a look at what the attendance figures at those things were, but were they there? And if we present survey data, they'll take a look at the survey data. It's not a problem. We've got several of those coming up. But what they want to do is have a reasonable assurance that this is a direction the community itself wants to head in. And so the people that are most interested in that are children, parents of children, should be involved in that somehow. And hopefully they will. It should take them, there's a lot of reading if you're not familiar with it. The paragraphs that are underneath here in the explanation are not written in educationese. We try to put it in parentese. Try to take it out of what we usually get for communications that I would write to another administrator and say, how would I write a parent? So we've done some work on that. We've passed it through a couple of parents that have had absolutely nothing to do with the cluster community at all and said, what does this mean to you? And after reading it, they were pretty informed about what they thought they could make a decision with it. So we keep trying to find ways to, yes, ma'am.
I'd like to first of all say this is amazing, and thank you guys to all the people that have done the hard work. And it's really, and I guess my thought process is that because you guys are all so amazing, that's why these seats are empty. Because there's a huge vote for the board and what you guys are doing, that we don't have to be worried. We can go put our time and energy in different places because you guys have got it well covered. So again, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I think the most important thing is when you continue to talk about participation on this survey to submit to the district for approval. What I think the most important thing is for the educators that are here is how are we going to get the message out that making sure not just an email blast, but is there going to be handouts to the kids they take home to their parents that they almost have to, say, hey, your mom and dad need to sign this, almost.
It's a campaign to school side.
Yeah, it has to be multi-level.
I think it's getting the word out for all leaders here. If you do anything for your school, any volunteering, any little thing, this is the most important thing that you can do for your school for the future. And I think we just have to get to their emotions. Anything. This is important. And even you can do it.
About 50 people here tonight. You take me and Julie out of the mix. I've got 10 friends that probably live in La Jolla. Okay?
Why couldn't
I knew you were going to say that.
why couldn't the individual schools take $25, $50 from the foundation and say the first class that gets, some participation is going to get an ice cream party or a pizza party or, instead of the kids will buy with parents.
Principals can sit down with those ideas.
Well, and I'm like anti-flyer, like I got the paper.
I'm not a principal.
But I agree with that. This would be the one time where I like the teachers giving each student a flyer. The parent has to sign it so they know about it with the link on the flyer, just to make sure everybody knows. Because even that, proposal to the board. Yeah, little sheets.
For those of you that have middle schoolers and high schoolers, remember the black hole of the backpack? I got stuff that went in there as ninth graders when they were freshmen, and I didn't see it again until they were seniors. And I'm in education, or what? Black hole there too.